a few of the people we have here on the show tonight. We have Christine Tu, who is a senior at 2468 and one of our co-lead programmers, and she'll be assisting James Wynn on the Q&A part. James is driver and is the lead of the design team for our program here at 2468. Kelsey McCormick is a junior, and she, along with Shrestha Kita, will be our outreach team leads for next year as they're juniors. And then we have Selena, who will be hosting the start. Selena is a senior, and Selena is co-lead of our outreach team. So Selena, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you and let you begin the show.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Selena, and like Coach said, I am the outreach co-lead of 2468. Welcome to our inaugural First in Focus presentation. Team Appreciate is really excited to start this speaker series. Today, we are honored to have Andy Baker speaking about FRC design history. In 2004, Andy co-founded AndyMark, one of FIRST's foremost suppliers. Today, he mentors FRC 3940 Cybertooth from Indiana. As Andy presents, feel free to drop any questions you might have in the Q&A box, and we will try our best to get your question in the presentation or the Q&A section. All right, take it away, Andy.
Thank you, Thank you, Selena. It's nice to be here. I'm honored to be on your show, not only your show, but your inaugural show. This is pretty cool. So kudos to Team Appreciate for hosting this wonderful resource, and thank you for having me join you tonight. So I'm going to talk about first history and first like game design and robot design and key design watermarks that were very important to the community along the way as I experienced first. I'm gonna screen share here so you guys can see a presentation. Let's hope it goes well. So I titled this a design history, but it's really more than a design history. It's a design history of robots and games. I'm going to tell some stories along the way, and as Selena said, if you have any questions, just post them in the chat box, and the 2468 members will come in and ask me the question. So yeah, I'm the president and owner of AndyMark. Mark Coors and I started AndyMark back in 2004, the fall of 2004. So 2005 was our first year as AndyMark. But I actually started as a mentor in 1998 as a mentor on Technocats Team 45. And even before that, when I was only 22, I sat down at the job, my first job at then Delco, and the guys in my cubicle were the mentors on the 1992 effort for the Technocats robotics team. Back then they were called the Science Cats. So they were designing this robot that drove around on the corn, and there were 28 teams that year, and it was pretty crazy. So I've been able to watch FIRST grow over all these years, and I've been a mentor since '98. So I'm going to talk about some game reviews. Some games I'll talk about more than others, and I'll talk about inspirational moments and some best practices and design credits where they're due. So the first year, '92, was called Maze Craze. It was 1 versus 1 versus 1 versus 1. 4 robots all on a elevated field, and they only played it once. It was in Manchester. One event was the World Championships, and that was it. Back then, it was the National Championships, and all the teams were tethered with a 6-volt powered. 6 volts of power were going to each robot, and they were tethered. So, can you imagine driving around and getting your tether cord, your power cord, wrapped around somebody else's cord? That was kind of crazy. And from what I heard, when they got to the event, Manchester, the spec was to run everything on 6 volts. So everybody was practicing on 6 volts. Some of the teams couldn't move very well. So for whatever reason, they upped it at the event to 8 volts. That's what I heard. So interesting change of events right there at the event. In '93, robots were pretty small still. They were not very tall. It was kind of like and they were shoving balls into these corrals on this I think it was like an I-shaped playing field with PVC pipes that were the border. They were playing on rugs, but I think that year they had a ball. One of the features of the game was there was a ball on the floor that they had to score, and it was filled with water. So they had a ball with water inside. So maybe that was the first water game for first. I don't know. Tower Power was played on a hexagonal field. It was 1 versus 1 versus 1. And back then, but by this time, there were like maybe 50 or 60 teams involved. And I think they still had one event, maybe in '94. In '95, they moved it. They had the national championships went to Disney, and they played at there's a pavilion in Epcot within the country of America within Epcot, and they played in that pavilion. They had I have a picture of this in a little bit. They had large balls. They had a goal post that you would move a ball through, and it was continuous scoring throughout the match. Whereas the other games previously, you would score the games at the end of the match depending on where things would end up, like balls and goals, with that kind of stuff. Hexagon Havoc was 1996, and they had large and small balls during that game. Actually, that's the one I have a picture of. I'll show you some pictures of some of these games. This is 92. It's kind of a blurry picture. It was kind of weird. For whatever reason, First got Russell Athletic to give everybody these Russell Athletic robots are about the size of an FTC robot. You can see the tethers. There's one tether in the middle of the field there. You can see it coming down. That was a big thing to worry about. The team that ended up winning that year was Clinton Nipro, and that's Havoc. Is that right? I don't think about it. I think that's Ramp and Roll. I might have made a mistake here. This might be 95. Sorry. But as you can see, the big ball went through the upright back. Got a lot more powerful, a lot faster, a lot more complex. In 97, there was this huge middle goal where it was like a big Christmas tree with pipes coming out of the side of the tree, and it would rotate, it would spin. So you would place an inner tube on those pegs in order to win. The scoring multiplier at the end of the game was really capping the top of the goal. So you can see some videos of, especially I think in the finals, it was Chief Delphi, Team 47 against Team Hammond, Team 71. And this is when Hammond won their first world championships, and they had this wonderful 4-bar linkage system, probably the first really effective, really quick 4-bar linkage system in first from 97 to cap the top of the goal. One of the strategy things that happened that year, though, was the Road Warriors, Team 121. They actually just had a wedge. The robot was a wedge, and they would drive around. They would tip people over because it was legal. So could you imagine just driving under somebody else and keep driving into them until they tipped over? And that was perfectly legal back then. So that strategy was not something that First had a rule in place for yet. But they did that, and it worked for them. In 98, Ladder Logic, that was my first year. And this is back when, I mentioned it before, but every match within first, if you can imagine, there was no alliance. You were on your own. So 97, 98, the final match on Einstein was one team against one other team. And so 98 was the last year for that. And also 98 was the first year that every team kept their team number. So you guys on Team Appreciate, imagine every year you would change your team number. Maybe you were a senior in 98, so 95, 6, 7, you'd have a different team number every year because they would renumber all the teams each year. So 98, everybody got their team numbers, and since 98, those numbers have stuck with all the teams since then. And there were 199 teams that year, which is only a little bit more than 2 divisions at a World Championships. So not many teams still in first in 98. One of the biggest design impacts that year, actually there were 2 significant design impacts that I saw, and one of them was Chief Delphi's swerve drive. That was very impactful, and it was impressive to see this swerve drive coming about without really any other. There's no cost. There's no off-the-shelf solutions for that. These were all homegrown designs. Same with Omni wheels. This was the first year that I saw any kind of Omni wheel. The first team I saw an Omni wheel on their robot was Team Hot, Team 67, and there were others. Like throughout the season, you're able to make some changes to your robot. So our team, Team 45, we put an Omni wheel on the front of our robot. But back then, you couldn't buy an Omni wheel. There weren't places to buy an Omni wheel. You had to make your own Omni wheel from scratch. It was pretty crazy. 99, Double Trouble. Probably, in my opinion, the biggest change, maybe except for this year, the biggest change in all of first I saw from 98 to 99. That was my first year, my first complete year in first. But imagine going from 98, everybody's playing in a match, and you play in a final match on your own. You're playing against another team. And then throughout the year, you prepare for the next year, and you go to kickoff in 99. And at kickoff in 99, Dean and Woody and all these people, they said, okay, this year, you're not going to win on your own. You're going to have an alliance of 2 teams. We're like, what? What the heck? I signed up to be in a robot competition, not depend on some other silly team to help me win or lose the match. That's terrible, blah, blah. And people were very crazed about this whole thing. And what happened, it was, first of all, it was genius because of how things worked with alliances. But imagine being in your pit, like you guys and ladies in your pit on Appreciate. If people come over to your pit, you want to tell them about your robot. You want to tell them about your outreach, your CAD designs, whatever. You want to tell them about what you're proud of with that robot. In 98, there was no incentive to do that except for maybe judges, and that was it. If I remember being a mentor on the team in 98, and if a student came around or a mentor from another team came over to our pit, I had to kind of watch what my student was telling them about our robot, because we had no benefit telling them how our robot worked. We wanted to just beat them in the next match. Because there were no alliances in 98, there was not this, there wasn't team-to-team marketing as much. There were some, but not as much team marketing, and there wasn't as much sharing back then. So 99, huge deal. Alliances came along. A big deal was sharing. And then what happened during the competition season in 99, this was in March, first was starting, I think after week 1, there were some teams that would break down in the elimination matches, and that alliance would only be like 1 on 2, and that wasn't very fair at all. So that was really, really hurtful to the team with the robot that broke down. So now they picked a 3rd team. So there were 3 teams on each alliance, but one of them sat out for each match. So there were, and I think the World Championships that year, there were 3 teams that won the World Championships, and the 3rd team I don't know if they played maybe one match throughout the entire elimination rounds of the World Championships. Pretty crazy year. The game piece from that year was a floppy. So I have a floppy. I found it out in the garage, and everybody had to make their own floppies. So this is like a kind of like a spandex wheel, a cheap, flimsy material. You had Velcro, loop Velcro on the outside, and you would fill it with packing peanuts. There's also Velcro here. So you would pick this thing up, put it in your robot, and you got points for raising it over 8 feet in the air. That got you, I think, 3 points, if I remember right. So I still have one of these. And you couldn't buy those anywhere. Everybody made their own game pieces. That was kind of crazy. So I'll keep going. All right. 2000 Cooperation First was I think it was an awesome game. There was kickballs, and you could score in your goal, or you could de-score your opponent and put it in your goal. The de-scoring thing was a big deal because you could make a big swing by de-scoring a high point item, which was a black ball, and putting it into your goal. Also, the big thing about 2000, probably the biggest thing about 2000, I think this was the first year of the IFI robot controller. I know the year before they had the Victor, that was a huge deal. A reliable robot motor controller, and I think 2000 was the first year of the robot controller. Maybe 2001 was the first year for the robot controller. I don't remember exactly, but that was when IFI did the control system for FRC. 2001 was a year that not many people liked. It wasn't disliked as much as Recycle Rush, the 2015 year, but 2001 was essentially it was kind of like an FLL event on steroids. It was 4 robots doing all the same, well, not the same thing, but they were doing the same task during the match, during the game, and then they would, in the finals, they would end the match, and then the alliance against them would have to go next, and they would have to perform better than the previous alliance and score more points. And between those best out of 3 matches head to head, whoever could beat the other team with points twice, they would advance. But you weren't playing at the same time. You were playing 4 robots on the field at once on the same alliance, and then the other 4 robots would play right after you and try to score more points. It was actually a pretty interesting game. There was a lot of features to the game. It had a large ball, and it had these kickballs. It had this really cool bouncing ramp, a lot like 2012. And there was the first time ever, and the only time I ever first did this, there was a time bonus that if you ended the match and got all the things done that you wanted to get done, and everybody hit the E-stop, then you got an extra bonus, extra multiplier. But the biggest thing with regard to 2001 was crazy pre-match negotiations. I'll try to tell this story and see what you think. Back then, we did not get a match schedule that would tell us what to expect for the day. You were told that you would be in either match 22, 23, or 24. So there would be 4 teams in each match. So therefore, there'd be 12 teams that all would show up at the same time. And those 12 teams did not know which match they were in exactly. They didn't know which teams they were paired with during that match. So about 5 minutes before the match before you were brought out to the field, they would get these 12 teams in a match, or 12 teams in the 3 matches in this cluster of matches, and the queuer would say, okay, you 4 teams are in match 22. And all of a sudden, those 4 teams had to negotiate who was doing which job within that 5-minute time period to play the next match. Now, back then, there were 3 student drivers and 2 coaches. 2 coaches. And the coaches could be students, or the coaches could be adults. And that year, we had some super tense negotiations between the matches, or before the matches, because We only had 5 minutes to plan the match. Nowadays, you got almost all day to plan some of your matches if you want to take that time. But that was the year the next year. Well, that was the year that we had a lot of tense matches, tense pre-match negotiations. It was really because of the timing. It wasn't because there were two adults behind the glass, in my opinion. It was crazy. In 2000, well, like I said, in 1998, Chief Delphi had this swerve drive, and they got their drive a little bit better and better. And this was the drivetrain from their 2000 robot, which I've said this many times. The Team 47 Chief Delphi robot from year 2000 is my favorite robot of all time. It didn't win Worlds. It broke, I think, in the semifinals before they went to the finals. They were against Heatwave and 131 during that match, kind of a famous match, but this is my favorite robot of all time. They did so much with no off-the-shelf parts, really elegant design. Okay, 2002, Zone Zeal. That 2002 was essentially a tug of war on these big 180-pound moving goals. There were 3 goals on the field, and they were 180 pounds, and they had casters on the bottom. So each goal weighed more than one robot. So if you could control the goal, you would control the game. So a lot of teams realized that if you could get the goal, get a hold of this 180-pound goal, and lift it up a little bit, maybe lift half of it up, like tilt it, or lift it all the way up, then now you had a downforce going into the carpet from your robot that went from 120 pounds or 135 with the battery or whatever, 130 pounds or whatever, into 310 pounds if you had the goal weight on your robot, if you were able to pick it up and hold it. So if teams did that, they would take advantage of a 2-speed shifter, and they would shift into a granny gear. They would go from a regular driving speed into a low gear, and then you could not stop them if they were wanting to go into your zone. So 2-speed shifters did really well that year. Team Hammond had this walking file card design that I call them a walking beam, where they would have this little thing that it's like, it's a walking beam, but they had file cards that would grab onto the carpet, and you could not move them. So that year, it was all about friction control and downforce on your robot, and if you can control these big, huge goals. And I got a picture of them coming up. 2003. Another imagine this. All these years we've been playing with our robots, and really these robots are just big, huge RC cars with there's some autonomous control within the robot. Like in 2001 when we had the bridge balancing action, our team had an autonomous function that balanced the bridge once we got on the bridge. So there's a lot of programming still involved, but until 2003 there was no autonomous mode. So we go to kickoff, and they tell us, oh, this year, the first 15 seconds of the match is all autonomous. We're like, whoa, why'd you do that? That's as bad as you telling us there's alliances in 99 and blah, blah, blah. So teams had to figure out how to do auto mode. Most teams didn't. I would say probably many, many teams that year did not have an auto mode. The teams that went to World Championships that did well had an auto mode. And the best one, in my opinion, by far, was Wildstang, Team 111. And they ended up being on the winning alliance. And they had an auto mode that was fabulous. Also, 308 had a really good auto mode. It wasn't quite as mature as 111's. But both of those teams, 308 and 111, had an auto mode where they would have a waypoint design method where they took their, it wasn't a smartphone at the time. It was like a Newton, or Motorola had something that was like a a tablet, a handheld tablet, and they would take a stylus and they would poke their stylus on their tablet, and that would define their auto mode before their match. They would actually draw it into their stylus. They would set it on their driver control station. Auto mode would start, and the robot would follow the waypoint designed into what they prescribed into that tablet. Pretty cool. The whole game was kind of a mess. First wanted us to stack these totes and get points for stacking totes. But at the end of the game, hardly no totes were stacked. It was all about King of the Hill and who owned the middle part of this platform at the end of the match. It was a fun game. There was a lot of speed. There was a lot of ramming. There were no bumpers back then. It was kind of crazy, but it was interesting. But auto mode won the game that year. Another one, 2004, Raising the Bar. I think this was an underappreciated game. I liked the game. I thought it was pretty crazy. There were a lot of things going on. There was a lot to do in auto mode that year. It was kind of difficult. There were these big purple kickballs that were above your head in the Alliance Station, and if you did something early on, you could get the kickballs down, and then you would start scoring those balls. There was a big ball that you would use as a doubler. But the weird thing about that game was you could not score the kickball. You pick up this kickball, kind of like a cargo, kind of like cargo from deep space, almost the same ball. But the robot couldn't score the ball. Robot actually had to shove it into a hole in the Alliance Station. The Alliance student got the ball, it would shoot it into the goal. So many teams recruited basketball players to shoot the ball into this PVC pipe goal that the robot could not put the ball into. So the robot had to shove it into the Alliance Station. The student would grab the ball, shoot it into the goal, score points. Kind of cool, but kind of goofy. As far as designs, I'm not sure, I should have done more homework on this, but I think that was the first year of Mecanum Drive by Team 357. They called it Gesture Drive. And 357 Royal Assault had a person, a mentor on their team that worked for a company or had good relationships with a company that had the forklifts that had Mecanum wheels on the forklifts. 2005 was Triple Play. That was the first year that we had 3 versus 3 alliances. So again, a big watermark there, big change. All these years of alliances between 99 and 2004, it was just 2-on-2. So the good thing about 3-on-3 is if you went to an event in 2005, you had a lot more matches. You had a lot more plays because there was more throughput for each team because you had 6 robots on the field for every match as opposed to only 4 the year before. The cycle time of each match didn't change, but you had 50% increase in the number of matches you played because of the 3-on-3 instead of 2-on-2. So that was good because you got more plays. You went from maybe going to a regional having maybe 10 matches instead of maybe 7 matches the prior year. And we figured out, like, if you only played 6 or 7 matches at a regional back then a lot of lucky teams would be ranked number 1, number 2, number 3. There wasn't the numbers got the better teams who deserved the top rankings started getting in those positions after 2005. That was also the first year of the kit chassis and the kit gearbox that was really effective. There was a kit chassis in prior years, but not many teams used it. There was a pretty complex effort between multiple people in the fall of 2004 and the year of 2005 to make a really effective kit chassis that was led by IFI. Paul Copioli was involved, AndyMark was involved, and IFI was involved, but IFI was the main group involved sourcing all the parts and doing all the sheet metal. And that was a very effective design to get teams to what we would call not not have teams, not have as so many teams be boxes on wheels. Before an effective kit chassis in 2005, many teams didn't have good resources. They would be very happy if the robot simply moved during a match. The differences between teams like yours, your team is a high resource team, like, you know, the 1/8 teams, back then the 45s, the teams with high resources were way up here with performance, and the teams with low resources with not much experience, the rookie teams, they had a struggle just to make a robot to compete. So that kit chassis and gearbox really helped them clear the hurdle of having an operational robot and drive chassis. That was probably, that kit chassis that year was probably one of the biggest design impacts and watermarks for moving the design aspect of FRC forward in leaps and bounds. Aim High 2006 was a very auto mode ruled game. If you got auto mode, if you were good in auto mode that year, you could pretty much control the game. It was actually a lot like Infinite Recharge. You would shoot a ball through a hole that was a vertical hole. So a lot of teams shot line drives. We did not have a 5-ball limit, so you could pick up as many balls as you could. Very much like this year's game, but unlimited balls. This was 2002's. Sorry for the text on here. I stole this slide from a different presentation I made, but this was a design made by 71 that had those walking beams on the bottom down. Oops. So that was also a time when the robot could start in a vertical position and fall down and be a lot wider than the robot rules would say it had to start within. So there were some robots that would flop over to take advantage of being very wide. Gesture Drive, Royal Assault back in maybe 2003, 2004. This was their design of Mecanum wheels being driven. Mecanum wheels haven't always been a very highly competitive drivetrain in FRC. They are, by the way, in FTC. So there's many, many FTC robots that benefit greatly from Mecanum wheels. But if you see a Mecanum wheel drive system move around, it's pretty impactful. It kind of blows your mind on how this thing can move holonomically. I'm going to go through, I think I go through 2010 and I quit because maybe, hang on a second. Yeah, I do. So I'm not going to go through every year just so you guys can warn out. I don't touch the most recent years, last decade. You guys can find those things out pretty well, pretty easily. 2007 was a fun game, Rack and Rule. It had these tubes that you would score. You would specialize in either being a tube bot or a ramp bot. Some teams would do both. If you got off the ground a foot, you got extra points. 2008, it was kind of like a racing game. There was a lot of auto mode robots, a lot of fast robots, and you had this big, huge ball that you would throw over this horizontal ladder to get points. 2009 was a lot of things happened. Actually, guys on your team were very involved with some very impactful things on 2009. That was the first year of the National Instruments robot control system, the C-RIO, the predecessor to the RoboRIO. That was the first year, 2009. So first moved away from having an IFI control system into a National Instruments control or robot controller. I never forget, I got a call. I was working at AndyMark full time by this time, and I got a call from people at First in July. They said, "This is super secret. You got to sign an NDA, but we got to tell you something. All your Mecanum wheels, all your Omni wheels, all your high traction wheels, none of those are going to be legal in FRC this year." I'm like, "Whoa, that kills our revenue with wheels. What's going on?" So they said, "Well, we're going to let you bid on the mandated what they called a rover wheel. They put plastic tread around essentially a high grip wheel, so it wasn't grippy wheel, it was a slick wheel. So everybody drove around on a slick surface. So that game was all about traction control and managing the intricacies of those, what they called rover wheels. And so we were able to provide those rover wheels, and we sold a lot of those rover wheels, but we did not sell any Buchanan wheels, Omni wheels, traction wheels that year. That we had to deal with revenue issues because of that. 2010 Breakaway is the last one I want to give a review on. When First designs a game, the one thing they don't want to do is they don't want to make the game where someone can just lock it up. They don't want to have a team come along and essentially break the game. And what happened that year, there were a couple teams that tried to do this, but one team did it really well, and it was Lost Gorillas 469 out of Michigan. And they had you'll have to watch some videos and see some more details about this, but they had a design that really kind of broke the game. And if they played their game right, you really couldn't stop it. It was hard to beat. Now, with that said, they got beat in the final matches of Worlds on Einstein, essentially because one of their partners got stuck in a goal. Now, granted, the other alliance won 2 matches against them, but these guys are known for kind of locking up or finding the key to breaking that game in 2010. It was a cool game, but yeah, it was kind of neat to see that happen. Some inspirational designs along the way. I've listed some here. I want to skip over some things. I'm kind of running low on time, but let's see. Oh, here's one. From what I can tell, and people can correct me if they can provide proof to some of these things that aren't true, but from what I can tell, the first shifting transmission was Team 20 in 1997, and I think they shifted a lever arm on a DeWalt gearbox. The team I was on, 45, we did that in 98, and we published that design, and we kind of got famous for it. But in 97, Team 20 did it. And I think the first swerve drive was Team 47 in 1998. That was Chief Delphi. Chief Delphi now has merged with another team, and they're not around anymore. But Team 47, Chief Delphi, was one of the awesome teams. Hall of Fame team. No, hang on. World Championship team. Yes. First shift on the fly transmission, that was like with dog shifters or latex plates or some way to shift on the fly was a key thing in 2002. I know that 302 did that, 60 did that, and the team I was on, 45, we did that. First Omni wheel that I saw in person on an FRC robot was Hot Team in 1998. The first Buchanan wheel, I think that was 2004. People on that team might want to correct me. Joe, Adam, you guys let me know. It was it 2004, 2003, I don't know. And one thing that I was involved with on Team 45 back when I was on that team was in 2000, we started sharing designs, and it was a summer after the season was done. So that was something that we did. We would publish designs that worked for us, and that became a big thing after that happened. Also, Vince Walensky and Stephanie, I'm not going to pronounce her name right, her last name, I'm sorry, but they produced a behind the design series of books. I think they produced 3 books, and that profiled a lot of these designs and other great designs in FRC. So I talked a lot. Maybe I should take some questions and have some Q&A here.
Awesome presentation, Andy. Thank you so much for being here today. Next, we'll be moving into the Q&A session. Chat, if you have any questions for Andy, please make sure to drop them in the Q&A box.
The first question that we got from chat is, do you know when they started live streaming competitions?
Oh, man. It wasn't that far. It wasn't that long ago. Maybe 2010. I really don't know. 2010, 2011. And if you did live stream, you were kind of on your own. You first did not have a very common way to do it. The place where it started was really NASA TV. NASA had their own like cable TV channel, and they would live stream the kickoff, and they would live stream World Championships through NASA TV, and you had to get access to that NASA TV channel on cable.
So from Chief Delphi, we had a question. If you had a magic wand and could wave it to solve one problem that FRC faces, what would it be and how would you solve it?
I saw this one and I've thought about it. It's a good question. I think it was Marshall that asked it. Thanks, Marshall. If I could wave a wand and solve a lot of problems within FRC, it would be that each team believes they are being treated fairly within FIRST. Now, I think FIRST does a good job. I think the events do a good job. I think teams do a pretty good job of treating each team fairly. But I think the basis of a lot of our rules and a lot of the things we have to go through is because teams don't feel they're being treated fairly. If you hear about drama with referees or judges or the bill material or does this team have gracious professionalism, all those things could be solved if each team believes they're being treated fairly. So I think I would love to give that gift to everybody, to all the teams, so they would believe they're being treated fairly. I wish that they could do that.
Cool. So our next question is from Chief Delphi. What single aspect of robot design do you think can make or break a robot?
Okay, so Team 71, Team Hammond here in Indiana, they've won the World Championships 4 times. And they were, for many, many, many years, they were the only team that won World Champs 4 times. And the guy that ran their team for many years, and he's still around. He's still a great guy. He's a Woody Flowers Award championship winner. His name is Bill Beatty. He would give a presentation, talk about the 3 most important things about a robot. What do you think the first one is? You appreciate students. What do you guys think? Most important thing about a robot?
Simplicity.
Can move effectively, maybe?
What?
It can move effectively?
Yes, to move effectively. Christine, to move effectively. So that's drivetrain. I would call that drivetrain. Number 2, what's the second most important thing on a robot? Any ideas?
Game piece manipulation.
No. Now I'm telling you Bill Beatty's opinion. This isn't necessarily. I learned from him, but that would be a no. Any other guess? Number 2 most important thing on a robot: drivetrain. Number 3, guess what the 3rd most important thing on a robot is?
Is it drivetrain?
Drivetrain.
Cool. So
Thank you. So this next question is from chat. What is the toughest game piece in your opinion, and how would you design for it?
What is the toughest game piece to maneuver?
I think they meant what is the toughest game piece in FRC history?
Okay. Well, there's all kinds of challenges with game pieces. There's how they actually work versus how they're defined, what their spec is, because sometimes they're way out of spec at the event. Sometimes there's huge sourcing issues where you can't get a hold of them. I guess the most challenging one was the sourcing challenge from 2009. There were these goofy looking balls that were called. There was a supercell, and there was something else. There were these ribbon made balls had to look it up, but it was 2009, and Walmart was supposed to carry a whole bunch of them, and before the first week was done of build season, all of the first teams in North America, North America definitely bought out all of Walmart's supply. So now there is a shortage. So there were individual teams that were actually cutting up polycarbonate strips and making their own balls. And each year there's a sourcing issue with game pieces. Like I think Power Up, we had a sourcing issue with the covers over the crates and such. But that year was terrible. 2009 was the biggest challenge of the game piece. So it was just getting the right game piece in your hands. It was hard.
Cool. So our next question is from chat. What innovations in FRC design do you see coming soon?
There's a couple really, I don't know much about one of them, and the other one we've seen glimpses of, but I'd say there's two things that are going to impact FRC play, design and gameplay over the next few years, pretty big. First is vision. I think, especially this year with the shooting game that we had with Infinite Recharge, the Limelight vision system, the Pixie Cam, even the Life Cam, there's all kinds of camera systems that were in high demand. And so as those become more prevalent, as maybe the price gets pushed down a little bit more, maybe more teams get used to vision and using it, I think it's going to be a bigger play for FRC teams. The second thing that I know less about, but it really could impact gameplay, and I saw it demonstrated last year at IRI, would be, is it the Zebra RF tagging system? Bear with me, I'm a gearhead, I'm a mechanical guy. I don't know these RF systems as well as other people do, but when you can have essentially one big huge sensor system on the entire game field, and you can determine where every robot goes and track their movements and how fast they go, and deceleration and acceleration, you can essentially redesign a game that depends on these RF signals and sensors, but you can have the scoring of the game depend on things electronically a lot better than what we've done up till now. So that is a huge potential that could really impact game design and robot performance in the future. I think it's Zebra Technologies. Is that, I should know that, but yeah.
So we'll move into kind of a speed round since we have about 5 minutes left for Q&A. So this first one is, what is your favorite robot in the past 5 years?
Ooh. Gosh, I'm trying to think. Past 5 years. I think the Cheesy Poof robot from Power Up, that's probably my favorite robot. Handling the cubes, their auto mode system was just amazingly impressive. The effort that team went to plan each match, to work with other teams on their alliances throughout the entire day, kind of set the stage with how alliance networking and working within your alliance should be done in order to be at that level that they were at. And that robot, head and shoulders, performing better than most other robots consistently, was impressive.
Similar to that question, what was your favorite robot from not the US or Canada?
Last 5 years.
Not necessarily in the last 5 years. Just any robot outside of US or Canada.
Okay. I'd say, well, I mean, I think they deserve a lot of credit this past year. Team Rembrandts from the Netherlands winning world championships in Detroit as the first European team to win an FRC World Championships. That was a very, very impressive robot, very impressive team. I remember when they won Rookie All-Star back in 2013, I think, and I was mentoring a team here in Indiana. I helped start a team that they thought they should have won Rookie All-Star at the same event that the Rembrandts won Rookie All-Star. So I remember when that happened. And then now, this past year, they win World Championships in Detroit, and that was a very impressive robot. I actually got to meet that team more in detail out at Los Angeles North Regional this year at the Mamba Center during week 1. So it's a very, very neat team.
So I think we have time for one more question. So what COTS items other than the KOP chassis has had the biggest impact on FRC designs, and what new product could have a similar impact in the future?
What new product? I'll take the new product one first. I think more and more teams are going to need more and more sensors, and if we can make more systems that are sensing systems, really elegant, simple, easy to use sensing systems like LiDAR or vision or those kinds of things, the more those things come along, the better off FRC is going to be, and we're going to get better auto modes, better robot-like experiences. As far as a COTS park, besides the Kitaparts chassis, that's like my favorite, or it's been the most impactful. And I have a regret with this one too. I think it's the hex bearing. If you think about the hex bearing and the environment the hex bearing works within, hex shafts, hex hubs, hex board gears, that allowed a lot of teams to get rid of a failure on their robot being the machine key. Machine keys would be lost, they'd be sheared, they'd be gone in a lot of matches. And a lot of teams lost a lot of matches because they lost a machine key. And so we at AndyMark are proud that we developed that half-inch hex bearing. No one else had that before we did. And now a lot of people have it, and my regret is I should have probably patented it at the time when we got it. We didn't do that. Then again, if we patented it, then the cost would still be pretty high because we would have the patent on it. So it's probably best for the community that it wasn't patented, because now a lot of different groups sell a hex bearing that looks just like our hex bearing. There were years that we had trouble keeping them in stock, so therefore other groups came about and sold the same hex bearing that we had. And that's okay. That's what a market does, and it drives down the price. The market can benefit from that lower price, but I'm pretty proud that we developed the hex bearing. Me and Mark developed the hex bearing. Probably, I think it was over 10 years ago. I think it was 2000. I should know. 2008, 2009. We developed that hex bearing, and there were some years that we had some little problems on that hex bearing, but recently it's been a pretty easy to get product for many teams to have.
Cool. I'm actually going to squeeze in one more question. Could you comment on your quote unquote habit costume?
Oh, okay. There's a picture. When I was on Technocats, many years we would have a team theme, like kind of like how First has the theme every year. What this year was Star Wars. Last year was space or deep space. The year before it was video games, steampunk, different themes. Well, our team individually had a theme. 2007 it was a rock and roll theme. 2008 gosh, what was it in 2008? I don't I don't remember. Oh, we were a racing team in 2008 because of the racing theme of the game. We were a race team, I think. Was that? Oh, 2010, we were Power Rangers. So I was a drive coach. I was the green Power Ranger. That was not a proud moment. But 2009, our team theme was the Blues Brothers. And so the driver was Jake. The operator was Elwood. Our human player was the sheriff. These are all characters from the movie Blues Brothers. John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, way before your time. And the drive coach, oh, there you go. Thanks, Norm. The drive coach was me, and I was a nun. The nun was she was very, very ruthless, hard driving woman in this movie. And so our drivers were Stephen and Eric there, and we go to the Washington, D.C. regional, first regional we go to that year, 2009, and our robot was working pretty well, and we did not lose a match. So we had this drive team dress up. Our pit was the country bunker or whatever we called it, and everybody had the Blues Brothers gear on, and we didn't lose a match the first event, so I knew that we had to continue with this theme. So I rented that nun outfit. I even wore it to I wore it to World Championships, walked around at Worlds, and when I was with these two guys, it was kind of funny. It was kind of cool. But if I was by myself, just walking through the pits, dressed as a nun, people were like, "What the heck are you doing?" And I had a lady come up to me and said, "I think that's inappropriate. You should be ashamed of yourself." And I said, "Well, hang on a second. I'm Catholic. My brother-in-law, who's a priest, I asked him about this. He thought it was pretty funny. I think I'm okay. It's just a joke. We're doing the Blues Brothers theme with our team, and I'm playing along with my students." She still was not pleased at me, but yeah, that was a good time.
Cool, thank you so much. So I think we're just about out of time. Sorry for the people who we missed question-wise, and I'm going to turn it to Selena to close off.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for coming to First in Focus, and thank you, Andy, for your great presentation. We're really honored that you all came tonight and hope to see you again next week on Thursday the 16th at 7 p.m. Central. We'll be hosting another First in Focus conference, this time discussing outreach. Keep an eye on social media or Chief Delphi to get more information about that. We also want to shout out some other teams that are doing virtual events, such as 624, who is hosting workshops on Saturdays, and shout out to Girls of Steel, who invited us to their event, the Greater Pittsburgh Regional. We're also very happy to say that First Signing Day will still be taking place on May 20th. We'll be sharing more information soon, but are excited to still celebrate first seniors given our shortened season. Thank you again, everyone, for coming.